Okay, I'm Neil Mavis. I got my CWNE back in May, number 311. It was well worth it for all the people that are in here wondering, is it worth it? I now pick and choose the projects. It was well worth it. There's my tagline, Mavis will save us from crummy Wi-Fi, to help you remember. And because I got my CWNE, I brought some inspirational beverages along for us new CWNEs to celebrate. So the business of the Wi-Fi business. The audience that I'm looking at is there's three types of people in the audience: new Wi-Fi enthusiasts that are trying to get into the business, experienced W-2 employees that get occasional side requests to do projects, and then the big dog veterans. And so here's what I'd recommend to everybody in the business of the Wi-Fi business. You must have an LLC. It's easy to set up. It has a lot of benefits. You can go ahead and get the paperwork online. I've done free Wi-Fi work for lawyers, and they help come up with the paperwork. I'm from Oklahoma. The filing fee for the Secretary of State's about $150, $75 a year. It's free to get online to get a tax ID. And then what I recommend you do is have a separate bank account. If you're a W-2 employee and you're doing side projects, get your W-2 money deposited to one bank, and a completely different bank have that as your LLC. That way you're putting them into separate silos. Next, I've taken an H&R Block tax course, and the only thing I remembered out of that 6 weeks course is pay somebody else to do it. And I recommend you do that. It cost me $400 a year to pay somebody to do my taxes. You're 8 times less likely to be audited. And if you ever are audited, the tax preparer goes, not you. So like in this conference, which is my LLC is paying for this, I take all the receipts, stick them in an envelope, take all the envelopes at the end of the year, I take the box and hand it over to my accountant, and they take care of all the expenses for me. The benefits of an LLC is you get a write-off your taxes. Like this, instead of paying my W-2 income and then paying taxes, I get basically a 30% tax reduction. I got 5 figures back last year on my tax refund. You also get discounts because you're now a business, 30 to 50% on average, and you may get some liability coverage. And depending on the work you're doing, such as if you're doing hospitals, you may want to buy errors and omissions coverage. So the next step, what are the signs of good and bad organizations to work for when you're doing side projects? Good ones, they have a fair contract. They're willing to negotiate a fair contract, and I've got some really good examples of really bad contract clauses coming up. They pay weekly, they pay on time, they prepay your major expenses, they prepay your travel expenses, your airline, hotel, and you want to get yourself into a situation where you are not exposed to paying for their projects. You can easily get 80% of your expenses paid in advance by these organizations. What's an example of a bad organization to work for? They insist on an unfair contract, and I've got a company coming up where they begged me 8 times to do a project, and I'll show you the contract clauses of what's bad. They pay slower than every other week. You are not a collections company. They avoid companies that pay over 30 days. I've had 30 and 45-day companies. And one, which I'll show you in a minute, didn't pay for 6 months, which means they're never going to pay you unless you threaten them with a lawsuit. And part of their business plan was they expected you to sue them. You would settle out of court for 30% less, and they expected that 30% less discount. So free consulting. You got to do free consulting sometimes to get the business, but limit it as a sales call. So I only do a 1-hour initial meeting, and in my head it's a sales call, it's not free consulting. You're displaying your talent and skill, but you don't solve their problem. I've had 2, 3, 4-hour what I thought were sales calls that turned into unpaid consultation. I've been offered $600 a night hotel rooms at exotic locations to do their Wi-Fi, and some people in this room know a couple of years ago I got flown out to a large city to do a competition, won the competition, but they stole all my intellectual property and I ended up losing in the long run. Consider doing free Wi-Fi work for a lawyer, a doctor, and your close friends and relatives. You can get some goodwill out of that, but minimize your cash flow to 0. Do only your time only. Okay, RFPs. Some people call it request for proposals. I call it a request for piracy. The only RFP I have ever won in my entire life is the one I helped write. If you are not helping write the RFP, you are giving away unpaid services. A horror story, 3 of them. RFP losers were offered discounted invitation at your expense to their tech fair. The worst one was a government RFP. Bidders flew in from around the country to recreate a server data platform for an incumbent thing. Basically, they had rigged it where you would never win the RFP. And then the last one, my information was given away to somebody else who had already won. So here's what I do. Whenever I get an RFP response, I have a boilerplate response that says, here's my Wi-Fi certifications, here's my hourly rate, see you later. Because you're just helping them get some bid information. Expense vouchers, I call them time vampires. A lot of the accountants out there, they're slow, archaic, unreasonable paperwork. I've got one company wanted me to tape down every receipt to a piece of paper, circle the date, circle the amount, put down the names of people. One time I spent 6 hours looking for a $39 expense. So here's what I do now. I don't do expense reports. Back to the 80% rule, I have companies prepay all my expenses and then I pay for my meals. It's not worth my time to do expense reports. So I just walk away from them. Okay, here comes the best part. I wish this was in October when we could call this the Halloween horror stories, but here's the contracts. This is the one company that called me 7 times. I said no to them due to their indemnity clause and proprietary clause. On the 8th call, I said, here's the deal. I'm still not going to sign it, but if I go to the airport and the ticket's there, I'll fly to your destination. And if I get to the hotel and it's not prepaid, I'm going to go back to the airport and fly home. So here's what the clauses look like. This is an example of a bad indemnity clause. So I'm going to read the blue text. The contractor, you, shall fully indemnify and hold the company and shareholders harmless, and you'll be basically paying, you'll become liable for any claim, any service, any. What that clause meant, and my lawyer read this to me, you are liable for insuring all of the company's other contractors. And so you just took over all the liability for the company that's hiring you. And even if you have insurance, you could go bankrupt on that one. Number 13, I caught this one and my lawyer basically backed it up. All property used by the contractor, which is you, during the course of a project are the absolute property of the company and remain the property of the company. By signing this agreement, you've basically handed over your laptop, your Echo license, your Sidekick, and all your other dongles. You have just given them away to the company, is what this clause means. So I said no 7 times to that. And so I did fly down there. They didn't prepay all the hotel nights. And what's really funny is one of my coworkers had one of those personal security apps, and they never offered it to me, where you check in, because it's a dangerous place. You check into the hotel, you check out. You check into the work site, you check out. Never press the red button unless your life is in danger. They didn't offer that to me. But here's a company that took 6 months to pay, and their boilerplate contracts. I'm not going to read this to you, but basically down at the very bottom, the outcome was I did negotiate this contract to my terms. Don't be afraid to negotiate. But 6 months later, when they didn't pay, I hired a lawyer for $450. They settled out of court for 70% less than what we agreed to, and that was part of their business plan, because I talked to other IT people. I found out that they do this to everybody. So hire a lawyer to review all your contracts. Codes of conduct. A lot of companies have to protect themselves. They use codes of conduct. 1 minute. And basically, I use the mother-in-law test. Don't say anything to anybody unless it's something you would say to your mother-in-law, and would that come back to you? What would they do to you? Never get yourself into 101. And the worst decision of my life, business decision, got 30 seconds less, was I bought a franchise. It was the worst financial business decision of my life. This is the book I'd recommend anybody buy. He reviewed my contract. It should have been printed on yellow paper, because almost everything in that book happened to me. And basically, they use gag orders. You think you can call up former franchisees and ask questions, and they'll tell you everything that happened. But when you find out it's not working, they threaten you with a frivolous lawsuit. You have either 2 choices at the very bottom. You make money for them, you sign their gag order, or you go to Chapter 7. The reason I'm up here, I was so destroyed by my situation, I filed Chapter 7, and that's the reason I can tell you about what happened. I'll tell you all about it. over the drinks this afternoon. And the reason I could tell you is I put that franchise into the Chapter 7. If they ever contact me, the bankruptcy court goes after them. So hope that all helps you. Feel free to contact me with any questions, and we'll go on to the next 10 talk.